A rise for everyone. David Cameron's departure honours list kicks up a storm, but Downing Street says tonight the new Prime Minister Theresa May will not intervene. Meddling in the former PM's resignation list would, it said, set a bad precedent. But that hasn't stopped the attacks.
David Cameron seems to have found a lot of mates that he wanted to reward, and that's upset everybody. I'm sure he's got a lot of mates that need rewarding.
Also on News at 10 tonight. Russian athletes are having sleepless nights, say their bosses in Rio, as they demand clarity on whether their athletes will be able to compete. The mother and father of the US Muslim soldier killed in Iraq tell News at 10 of their shock at Donald Trump's comments.
The hurt is there, but my religion and my culture and my strongness tells me just forget him.
And a sight for sore eyes, two of our most beautiful national parks just got bigger.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. When he wanted our votes, one of David Cameron's phrases of choice was, "We're all in this together." Whatever he meant by that, it certainly seems to have been his own personal team motto. If a leaked list is anything to go by, honours have been showered like confetti on those who worked for him over the years and those who supported him in his fruitless attempt to keep the UK in the European Union. The decision on whether he'll get all these farewell presents through now rests with the Honours Committee, made up of civil servants and independent members, after the new Prime Minister Theresa May said she didn't want to get involved. Jeremy Corbyn said she really should.
I want to thank everyone who's given so much support to me personally over these years.
And now we know how Mr Cameron intends to thank them. A leak of his list of those he'd like honoured by the Queen suggests David Cameron has nominated close to 50 people, cabinet ministers, Tory donors, even his wife's stylist. And as lists go, this one hasn't proved hugely popular. Of course, other Prime Ministers have issued honours lists on leaving office, but this one is apparently longer than previous versions. And Jeremy Corbyn, who was busy being endorsed as Labour leader by the CWU union today, said a system whereby Mr Cameron can hand out gongs to his political pals needs reform.
David Cameron seems to have found a lot of mates that he wanted to reward, and that's upset everybody. I'm sure he's got a lot of mates that need rewarding. I do not believe in honours for politicians who are in office, because I think to be in office, to be elected to Parliament, to a council, anywhere else, is honour itself, and so I don't make nominations for political honours.
Unusually, several serving cabinet ministers are thought to be in line for knighthoods, and Theresa May could intervene on the gongs heading for Chancellor Philip Hammond and Defence Secretary Michael Fallon. Will Straw, the son of former Labour Minister Jack Straw, who headed the Remain campaign, could get a CBE, and some less high-profile names have also caused controversy. George Osborne's former aide Thea Rogers could be honoured with a CBE, so too Samantha Cameron's stylist Isabel Spearman.
In this country, we don't, by and large, provide a great deal of funding for political parties and political campaigns, and it's in the taxpayers' interest that public-spirited individuals step forward into that breach and do it. And I think that they shouldn't be excluded from the honours system.
Mr Cameron's former staff at Downing Street, like his communications chief, are on the leaked list, but he's made a significant recommendation for the man who was his Chancellor. George Osborne, who was famously booed at the 2012 Paralympics, could be awarded the Companion of Honour, an award so special only 65 people can be members at any one time.
Former Prime Ministers need to be careful, therefore.
Vince Cable was knighted in the honours list after the 2015 election. Nevertheless, he thinks this one is different.
Giving honours to party donors, given a lot of money, and I think that rather exposes the rottenness of our system.
Theresa May won't intervene, said Downing Street today, so this list might remain largely unchanged.
Well, if the leak is correct and the honours do go through, David Cameron's 48-strong list will turn out to be longer than those of other recent Prime Ministers, at least when you compare like for like and don't take into account peerages. We don't know what peerages he is or isn't going to recommend yet. Gordon Brown's wasn't a formal resignation list, but he recommended 3 people to receive knighthoods, although many others were made peers or given Privy Council titles. Tony Blair declined to hand out any resignation honours because the cash for honours scandal was swirling at the time. Sir John Major honoured 41 people and Margaret Thatcher slightly fewer, 36 in fact, when she resigned in 1990. Perhaps the most infamous resignation list, the so-called Lavender List, was Harold Wilson's 40 years ago. It wasn't as large as David Cameron's, 31 people were honoured in all, but the number of wealthy businessmen did draw heavy criticism at the time. Well, Chris Shipp is here with me now. Chris, it does feel like a row about the resignation honours list is predictable. Yes. But, so give me a sense of scale. I mean, do you feel this is sort of worse than normal?
Yeah, it looks like he has taken almost, well, nearly all of his staff in Downing Street and recommended them for some sort of honours or not. You're right to compare it to the previous ones. If you look at 2015, and interestingly, in my report there, we heard from Sir Vince Cable, because he was one of those, including Sir Danny Alexander, who were knighted in the Dissolution Honours in 2015. This feels a lot bigger, though. But I think, you know, when you can have an honours system, it requires someone to be nominated and someone to nominate them. The whole thing is going to sort of end up in this way. Now, I think a lot of people will say, look, these people work 24/7, they've served David Cameron, they've been in public service, this is their recognition. But I'm sure there are plenty of people watching this tonight thinking, I serve my boss every day and I work 24/7. No one ever gives me any other reward other than my wages at the end of the month. And that's why I think this is a particular problem and always will be.
OK, there is a bit of a row about it. There, you know, again, there nearly always is. But it seems to have a little bit of heat in it, genuinely. Is there any chance of this list changing, or do you think this is pretty much going to go through as Bill?
I sort of think if David Cameron wants this list, and this is the list that's going to go forward, the only way it can change, 2 minor changes probably, if the vetting committee says there's an issue with this particular person because of their financial propriety or whatever, that might be an issue. Or Theresa May might say to those serving ministers, people like Philip Hammond, the Foreign Secretary, Chancellor now, isn't he? And Michael Fallon, the Defence Secretary, she might say to them, look, if you want to stay in my cabinet, don't take this honour. But I can't see it changing in any other way. And Downing Street were quite clear today she ain't getting involved.
OK, Chris, thank you very much indeed for now. It is no secret that American warplanes have been operating over Libya, on occasions bombing positions of so-called Islamic State. But now that campaign has entered a new phase at the request of Libya's unity government. For the first time, American jets have attacked IS positions in its main stronghold, the city of Sirte. Government forces have been trying, so far it must be said without success, to win back Sirte since May.
Libyan troops and militia have been fighting with so-called Islamic State fighters in Sirte since Friday. The Libyan government and the multitude of different militia in the country may have their differences, but they are united on the threat that the IS presence in Sirte poses to the whole country. Announcing his government's request to Washington for US airstrikes in a national address, Libya's Prime Minister said the extremist group had suffered significant losses, although he didn't provide details. The city of Sirte on Libya's northern coast has seen some fierce fighting between Islamic State militants and forces from the UN-backed Libyan government. Just a few months ago, it was thought there were around 5,000 IS fighters in the city. But the Pentagon says the government's offensive has reduced that number to fewer than 1,000. Even so, there are several areas it still controls, including the university, the main hospital, and a strategically important conference centre where it's believed IS is storing weapons. Pentagon officials said an IS tank position and 2 vehicles were targeted. A spokesman said the strikes would help Libya's government of national accord, the GNA.
GNA-aligned forces have had success in recapturing territory from ISIL, and additional U.S. strikes will continue to target ISIL in Sirte and enable the GNA to make a decisive strategic advance.
Western forces have long been worried by IS's presence in Libya, given its close proximity to southern Europe. The US strikes will now prompt other countries like the UK and France to consider whether they might do the same. For its part, the US says its operations in Libya have no end date at the current time. Braggy Omar, News at 10.
And of course, American planes are not the only foreign aircraft involved in attacking Islamic State strongholds. Russia has been doing the same in Syria, supporting President Assad. But today, one of its helicopters was shot down. It was a military transport helicopter delivering food aid to the besieged city of Aleppo, or so the Russians said. All 5 people on board were killed. The biggest loss of life, Russian life anyway, acknowledged at least since they started operations in Syria. Now, whether or not Russian sportsmen and women should be in Rio for the Olympics is a matter, of course, of fierce debate. But more than 200 are, and yet they still don't know whether they will be taking part because of the row about state-sponsored doping. Now, it looks like the decisions on which ones go home and which ones stay and compete could come in the next 24 hours. Whatever you think, it seems hardly like the best way to prepare for the Games, which begin on Friday.
Even British athletes are keeping an eye on which Russians will be allowed to stay and who will be sent home. They are, of course, decisions which could have an impact on their medal chances. Team GB's boss here told me today, whatever the timing, he supports the strong stance taken by some sports to banish cheats.
I think what we're seeing is international federations, in some cases, really stepping up and making it a level playing field for all nations now. And what we can see is that if you are going to cheat, at some point in time you're going to get caught.
And with the opening ceremony now just 4 days away, many other nations are talking up a similar hardline approach. Of the thousands of athletes in the Olympic Village, the entire Russian team woke up this morning still not knowing whether they'd be on the next plane home. This state of limbo is giving them sleepless nights.
Russian people, saw a lot of hardship during their life, and it's sadly it's not good what's going on, but we are positive and we're optimists.
An investigation into doping at Russia's Sochi Games implicated a host of summer sports too. It prompted retests of samples from the Beijing and London Olympics and calls for a blanket ban for Russia at Rio. The IOC told individual sporting federations to choose who they deemed clean, but reserved the right to overturn those decisions. Russia's sports minister said today he was expecting the final verdicts imminently. Then the team can move from its current nervous state, who will be banned and who will get access, to a working state and start competing. The Russian controversy is currently stealing the limelight here, a situation that will no doubt change the moment it's resolved and the sport begins.
And Steve joins us now from Rio. Steve, this is all pretty confusing. Are we any clearer about when we're going to find out which athletes can and can't compete?
Well, all the International Olympic Committee will confirm, as they've promised to give all their verdicts by the end of play on Thursday, which of course is the day before the opening ceremony. What I have managed to establish, though, is this 3-person panel is going to do it on an ad hoc basis. That's sport by sport, athlete by athlete. And I anticipate the first results to start trickling out sometime tomorrow. Now, of course, this is all very unsettling for the Russian athletes who are here, but it also reflects really poorly on the anti-doping system that we have in place, and I suspect there'll be major changes to that, but only after the Olympics. As for Team GB, well, they've been very vocal on this subject as the Games approach, but now they're here. I think the question of who's going to be in, who's going to be out, which Russian athlete may or may not compete against which British athlete, well, I think that's going to be set aside, because at this stage, team officials think that that's just going to serve as one thing, and that's a distraction.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. And away from the row about Russia, the other big issue in Rio is the potential threat from the Zika virus. The authorities in Brazil have made a big deal of showing how they are dealing with it, but victims say not enough is being done for them.
Born in Brazil's Olympic year, yet a world apart from the glory of the Games. This is Barbara de Souza, one of this country's 1,600 Zika babies. Her mother, like so many, struggles alone, on a small allowance from the state. To start with, I used to cry, Glacy tells me. But what's the point? Brazil has lavished many millions of pounds on the Games, but has cut health spending. And in the favelas where Zika was rife,
the conditions that gave rise to the mosquito-borne virus remain. Barbara's mother believes more athletes should have boycotted Rio, not out of fear, but to support Zika's victims.
I agree. Don't come. Maybe if everyone stayed away, that would work better. Then the government would act more quickly.
Health officials say that in these cooler winter months, the risk from Zika is greatly diminished. Far fewer mosquitoes, the fumigation sometimes for show.
What we have is a huge amount of cases that came decreasing over this past month, and now we have just 1 or 2 cases per week. That is really low risk for dengue or for Zika.
Zika might not be a potent threat right now, but still it has cast a deep shadow over these games because there are many in this city for whom 2016 will not be remembered as the year of the Olympics. Rather, it will leave a legacy that is altogether more bittersweet.
Gleice takes her daughter to the hospital that has become Brazil's foremost centre for the study of this condition. Scans reveal the extent of the damage to the brain, but not the prognosis. She's desperate to know what kind of life her child will lead, but there can be no definitive answer.
My biggest fear is what would happen if I die first. Who would look after her then?
Just one certainty, the Olympics will come and go, but Zika's victims will require a lifetime of loving care. John Ray, News at 10, Rio de Janeiro.
And there's been a new warning about the Zika virus. American doctors say pregnant women should avoid the part of Miami where 10 new cases have been discovered. If you've been following what appears to be candidate Trump's latest misjudgment, although the rules of politics are being rewritten all the time, it seems, so who knows, you will know that the would-be American president has appeared to criticise a Muslim couple whose soldier son was killed in Iraq. Mr. Trump saw them on television at Hillary Clinton's Democratic Party convention last Thursday night and questioned why Captain Hamayoun Khan's mother, as he put it, might not have been allowed to speak. Well, today she told our Washington correspondent Robert Moore that she was hurt, but that she was putting it behind her.
It was a moment that riveted a nation.
You have sacrificed nothing and no one.
This attack last week on Donald Trump from parents of a fallen Muslim American soldier is still dominating the campaign.
Have you even read the United States Constitution? I will gladly lend you my copy.
Captain Hamayoun Khan was killed in Iraq 12 years ago, an American soldier who died a hero. Today, his parents emphasized to me that Trump's anti-Muslim rhetoric is a stain on American politics.
Not only the moral compass is missing, but in addition to that, the empathy is missing. That disqualifies him from even the candidacy of this office.
Today, Trump refused to answer questions.
Mr. Trump, anything on the cons?
But he shocked even his allies yesterday by claiming that Ghazala Khan, the fallen soldier's mother, was strangely silent at the convention, an apparent attack on a grieving woman and her faith.
If she was standing there, she had nothing to say. Maybe she wasn't allowed to have anything to say.
But today she did speak, and with dignity, refusing to take Trump's bait.
Has his attack hurt you, or are you able to brush it off and brush it aside?
It hurt me. I had it in my heart. The hurt is there. But my religion and my culture and my strongness tells me just forget him. So I don't have anything to say to him anymore.
Trump also caused outrage by saying that he, like the Khan family, had made sacrifices.
I think I've made a lot of sacrifices. I work very, very hard. I've created thousands and thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of jobs, built great structures.
These outlandish comments have prompted Kaiser Khan to demand that all Republicans take a stance.
Are you saying this is now the time to stand up?
This is the time. There comes the time in the history in a person's life where moral values should prevail than political interest.
Khan's plea is to reject the politics of division.
This is height of ignorance on this candidate's part, that he does not know that how much Muslim Americans, how patriotic they are. These are the heroes that have laid their lives for the defense of this country, and you will see Muslims, Christians, Jews, everybody. There is room for everyone here.
The question is whether the sacrifice of a Muslim American soldier more than a decade ago now has the potential to change this presidential race. Robert Moore, News at 10, Washington.
Now, it's taken a few days to respond, but as you might expect, China is none too pleased by our government's decision to take another look at the Hinkley C nuclear deal, particularly as it's been suggested that concerns over the security implications of involving China were a key motivating factor in the delay. One Chinese news agency said British suspicions about China involvement in the project will damage cooperation, and there's anger rather closer to home. An economist brought into government by George Osborne specifically to improve relations with China could be on the point of resigning in protest at the delay. Our business editor, Joel Hills, is here. I mean, Joel, maybe we ought to begin with a bit of context. As you know, David Cameron, George Osborne put a huge amount of effort into wooing China. The Minister we're talking about, Jim O'Neill, let's just remind everyone who he is, came from Goldman Sachs, specifically with the idea of improving China. And with Brexit, you would think that was more important than ever. Where are we tonight? What is the response and what has he been saying?
Well, he was brought in, as you say, to breathe life into the Northern powerhouse and to use his golden contacts book in developing relationships with China. And there's plenty of signs, Tom, that had yielded something. We just saw a couple of weeks ago a Chinese property company committing to sinking £220 million into Sheffield. When Theresa May formed her new government, she phoned Lord Jim O'Neill, and my understanding is she communicated to him she wanted him to stay on and was committed to building that relationship with China. She did not communicate her Hinkley hesitancy. So Lord Jim O'Neill learned about the further delay online and was furious. His view, my understanding is that while it's understandable the government wants to reassess, this has been handled in such a way that is insensitive at best, naive too, and risks damaging a relationship that everyone's worked so hard building up, and causing unnecessary offence.
OK, you've said several times in the reporting of this that EDF, the big French company, has already spent £2.5 billion. Now, the suggestion is they're going to want that money back if this doesn't go ahead. I mean, have they got a case, do you think?
Absolutely they will. I mean, and absolutely they have. I think if you look at that money has been spent on a number of things, buying up land, developing the technology, submitting the planning process. They had, Tom, to divert a river. They have built roads around the site. I mean, there's an awful lot that's gone on an understanding that this was an absolute surefire thing. If all the ticks could be put in the boxes in terms of safety and in terms of raising the financing, that this project would go ahead. Now, the first £1 billion, I understand, was at risk. EDF won't get that back. But thereafter, they committed money based on a series of green lights and heads of terms, importantly. There will be big damages if the government pulls out of this.
OK, Joel, thank you very much indeed. Each and every murder that we report is shocking, but there is something particularly distressing about a 12-year-old boy being a murder suspect. A fatal attack outside a McDonald's in Ashton-under-Lyne in Greater Manchester last week is said to have involved the 12-year-old together with two boys who were 16 and another who was 17. The four of them appeared in court today accused of murdering a father in his 40s. The 12-year-old blew his mother a kiss as he left the court. 9 months on from the death of Lord Janner, the former Labour MP who was accused of being a paedophile, his daughter has felt able to give her first television interview about the allegations against him and how they were dealt with. Understandably, she believes her father was innocent, but she makes a wider point. Marion Janner said the way the investigation into child abusers in high places is being handled means anyone can say whatever they like about a public figure and are automatically believed and never properly challenged.
Right.
At her father's side as dementia took hold.
Look at the flamingo. Dad, look at the flamingo.
Marion Janner did everything she could to shield him from the 22 accusations of child sex abuse he was facing.
It was outrageous, surreal, Kafkaesque. It was appalling. And it's been a complete inversion of the usual strong British sense of justice. And suddenly, innocent before being proven guilty has been turned on its head, and in the context of somebody with severe dementia and now dead.
Greville Janner died before a trial of the facts could be heard. His family are angry that alleged victims can make allegations to the Goddard inquiry into child abuse without being challenged.
Anyone can say anything because there's no cross-examination, so people can say whatever they like without being properly challenged, and it will be accepted because that is the current position, is that anyone who makes accusations will be automatically believed.
Although there are 13 complainants, the former MP's children remain convinced that they can prove his innocence.
Have you ever, for a moment, doubted whether your father was innocent?
No, God, no, not at all. No, never. I can see people would think, oh, well, that's very sweet and she loves her dad and he was a nice dad and all that. It's not about that. It's actually looking at the hard evidence about his life and about the sort of nature of the current witch hunt.
But lawyers representing those allegedly abused dismiss the family's complaints.
Well, that is downright insulting. They were abused badly in childhood. They clearly remember what happened, have told the police, made statements, and they have a right to be heard and a right to some sort of justice.
The Janner family intend to place their evidence before a civil court and clear the name of a much-loved father no longer here to defend himself. Juliet Bremner, News at 10.
And tonight, the Goddard inquiry insisted that whilst its job is to establish facts rather than determine guilt or innocence, anyone making allegations will have their evidence questioned and their credibility tested. And finally, what better day than Yorkshire Day? Yes, it is, to announce that the county's Dales National Park is to become a quarter bigger to take in more spectacular scenery. The park, which is already home to a host of beauty spots, will now also include places like Ravenston Dale and the Howgill Fells. The Lake District National Park is also being extended, but on a smaller scale. There's already one Borrowdale in the lakes. Now there is to be another in the east, and Sizer Castle will also fall within the new boundary.
For people who love to be out in the fresh air, it is paradise. For 60 years and more, the Yorkshire Dales National Park, cyclists and walkers, cavers and climbers, and those who just love to sit still and look at the scenery. This is the great outdoors.
If you're into wildflowers, you need to come to the Yorkshire Dales.
And the views were fantastic, weren't they, today? You could see all over to the lakes.
And the Howgills.
And the Howgills.
And the limestone pavements.
Yeah.
Today, the great outdoors became 24% greater, with this park's total area enlarged by 188 square miles to include landscapes like this one. And yet it's not just the natural beauty that keeps visitors coming back, it's the people whose homes are here who make this place a living land and who work hard to make sightseers on foot and on two wheels feel welcome.
I've always found it very easy. We've always been accepted from day one, and it's a very easy, friendly place to come. Whenever you're on a bike, you just stop and everyone stops for a chat. It's always that way.
The Dale's just one of the parks being enlarged today from boundaries laid down in 1954. The border here used to be the edge of the old West Riding of Yorkshire. Now bits of Cumbria and even Lancashire are included.
It's amazing to think that just because of the way lines were drawn on a map 60 years ago, this was never part of a national park. Because whatever view you take of this place, it is an area of outstanding natural beauty.
From the limestone terraces of Great Asby Scar to the Howgills, Wild Boar Fell and the valley of the River Loon, people have always loved coming here, loved spending every spare minute here. Now they're protected by the park's special status.
And you're up there at 2,000 or 3,000 feet looking across. You can see across to the Lake District, over the Yorkshire Dales. I could see the Isle of Man out here. It's absolutely beautiful. Why would you want to be anywhere else?
For those who really love the peace and quiet of this place, the only fear was that too many people might discover it. But now it seems there will always be enough space here for everyone. Damon Green, News at 10 in the Yorkshire Dales.
That is the place to be. Let's just take a look at what might be happening tomorrow. Should the NHS be expected to provide drugs that lower people's chances of catching HIV? Judges will decide on a case tomorrow. The mother of Michael Sanford, the British man accused of trying to kill Donald Trump at a rally in Las Vegas, will make an appeal for him to be returned to a British prison to await trial. And the funeral of Father Jacques Camel, the priest killed in a church in northern France last week, will be held in Rouen Cathedral. I'll be here again tomorrow. For now, happy Yorkshire Day and good night. Thanks for watching.